He's here now. You're moving. You're moving now. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yeah, yeah, I totally can.
Oh, amazing. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna shift us over. We're back in pre-roll. We can see Michael. Michael, say hello to the internet.
Hello, Internet.
Excellent. And I'm going to start this pre-roll.
Hi guys, Michael of yesterday here. Your yesterday, my today. I almost said that. But I'd like to cover through with you ahead of tomorrow just the setup for the thing I'm going to be cooking. So to give you some sort of background, my idea for this stream was to go into the discount aisle and pick up the cheapest ingredients that were available, see what we can make out of it. Because I'm pre-recording this and James isn't on the other end of the stream, I'm going to be using more like jump cutty stuff, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of silence while I chop stuff up. But hopefully it should give some information on the stuff that I did before we started today.
So to start out with, just wanted to cover off what I'd managed to pick up. So here we can see I've got some bread here for 6p, some pig hearts, which is going to be the main ingredient of what we put together, for 56p. We've got a prawn cocktail there for 15p, and some lettuce for 5p. Now, if I was making something all at once, something really, really basic, a nice little starter, mix those together. That's about it. There's cooked prawns, some sauce, some lettuce. Nothing too fancy, but it's a nice little appetizer, and especially if you're cooking for a family, that it gives you something to start out with and fill you up before you start eating your main meal.
So what I'd like to cover off before we get into the stream is basically how I prepared the pig hearts for what we're going to do tomorrow. So pig hearts are a lot tougher than the flesh of the pig. So in order to make them a little bit softer, a little bit more like the kind of pork that we'd be used to eating, if while still more flavourful, we want to maintain that tenderness. So we're going to cook these low and slow for a couple of hours. And I'm going to just take you through the process of how to do that and make even really, really cheap cuts of meat taste pretty good.
Okay, so step one, I'm going to put a non-stick pot onto a medium heat, about a 3, probably a 4, so it heats up a little bit faster on these slow as anything electric hobs. Once we're done with that, we're going to get hold of the pig hearts and try and remove some of the liquid that's in this packet. So you can see in there it's quite a wet meat. There's some plasma sloshing around in there, and some looks like blood clots in there as well. Now, what that'll do if we don't get rid of it is glue it to the bottom of this pan. So ideally, in order to make a nice pan sauce to go with this meat, we want to get this as dry as possible, add it into the pan. It will then brown on the underside, and once it's browned, that bottom half of the pig hearts will be much less porous and much easier to remove. It'll stop sticking. If there's still blood in there, if there's still plasma in there, that's going to turn into basically glue. So that's going to be an issue. Once that's done, we'll then remove the pig hearts, add a little bit of water, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and just stir that around. And the sear, the brown marks that are left on the bottom of the pan are going to be the basis of our sauce. I'm then going to add in a little bit of chopped garlic, and that's it. Just cool that down as quickly as possible, and it'll be ready for tomorrow.
And in keeping with the mantra of hand to mouth, this recipe is going to require a very small amount of kitchen utensils. So even if you're not particularly well equipped, you can still do it. So this whole thing is going to need a stainless steel pot like the one that we've got here, a chopping board like the one that's magically appeared next to me, and one shitty steak knife to chop everything up. So next step is going to be to use some kitchen roll, which has also appeared magically next to me, to remove some of the liquid from around that hot. I don't have another tripod for the other camera, so I'm going to do it there. Hope it won't look too bad. Now, when you're buying meat that might be a little bit expired, it is important to just kind of sanity check what it is that you're making before you actually start to eat it, because if something is actually off about the meat itself, then that's a real problem. The kind of bacteria that grows on raw meat like this that actually makes you sick, it is also tends to live with bacteria that smells absolutely horrible as it grows. So it is worth doing just a quick smell test and a quick touch test to make sure that everything's okay with the meat, because it's close to when it's set to expire. It should be fine, but just in case it's not, just double check. The easiest way is the texture of the meat itself. If it's gone bad, generally speaking, you'd expect it to be sort of sticky or tacky. That's basically the bacteria that's on there. If it's been there too long, it's starting to create those toxic substances. It's basically sitting in a pile of its own shit on the surface of the meat, so that you can kind of tell quite immediately. And raw meat doesn't smell particularly delicious, but it's also pretty inoffensive. So again, if there's a strong eggy smell, if you smell it and you immediately regret that you smelt it, then there's a problem. In this case, we're doing okay. So I'm going to continue just patting this down. And I'm going to cut to when I've finished patting this down. And then I'm going to just pat that last bit. So pretty much the same the whole way through. Again, just making sure nothing's slimy, nothing's sticky, nothing smells like a really bad egg. And we're pretty much then good to start searing. So the pan's going to be up to temperature. I'll add a little bit of salt. Washing all the meat juice off my hands. So, just going to add a fine layer of salt to the bottom of the pan. Here I'm using weird, pretentious Himalayan salt, but table salt's just as good. I bought this stuff principally because it's pink. Okay.
Add that to the pan. It's going to make a sizzling noise. When you're cooking your heart, I would not recommend holding a mobile phone a couple of inches above the pot with one hand while attempting to cook with the other. And what that'll do is actually free you up from having to hold a mobile phone, and that will enable you to do all sorts of cool stuff, like hold something actually for stirring food, so you're not putting your hand into a hot pan while you're cooking. Top tip.
And what you can do with that is then leave it about 3 minutes, and what you'll start to see is that the pieces of in this case heart will begin to move a bit more easily in the pan. So we're going to see that bottom layer has now browned off. My phone has turned into a spoon, and I'm going to use that to remove this piece that's stuck on the side there. Falls off very easily, and generally just give things a bit of a move around. Okay, yep, that's looking lovely. So
yeah, we can see that's browned off nicely. They're no longer sticking. You can see that they're just moving around very freely. And that's because we've taken the time to pat that down and stop it from sticking horribly. As we continue to stir there, you can start to see these brown marks appearing on the bottom of the pan. They're going to be really, really flavourful, especially with that little bit of salt in there, just to kick things up a notch. So we'll continue stirring until that's browned off. And once that's done, we'll add a little bit of water, and that will loosen everything up. And we'll nearly then be done.
I say done. It does take about 3 minutes of real time. As you can tell by the fact that my phone has disappeared again, I am sort of cheating a little bit. Okay, now that's off the heat, I can see that there's a nice sear on the bottom of the pan. The pieces of meat are kind of superficially cooked at this stage. And then what I'm going to do is just add some water to the pan and just show you how that sear then converts into sort of the base of a rich sauce that we're going to be using tomorrow to produce a stew from. If you don't have a teacup that has a picture of the Queen looking grumpy on it, I don't know how you're going to do this recipe.
Can't emphasize this enough. Don't do this while you're holding a phone in your hand. It's really. Why is that showing as purple? It's really quite difficult. So what I've actually done there is while I've run away to get the phone, it's sort of cooled down a little bit. So let me just warm that back up. There we go, much better. And add a little bit of water. And you can see that already. It's just cleaning off the bottom of the pan there. And those marks are just dissolving into the water, and so we're going to have captured the flavour of the meat, and also that salt that we started out with is just going to add a little bit of sodium in there to really enhance it. And at this stage, this smells delicious already. Wouldn't eat it if you paid me, because that's going to be really tough, but it does smell really good. So again, if you're worried at all that perhaps the meat was a little bit more gone off than you realised, at this stage you will know. If your house smells like the drains have gone, do not eat the thing you are cooking.
There we are, Michael. Welcome. You are live, you are large, you are on Hand to Mouth Club. Thank you so much for coming again. You, of course, joined us during the Kickstarter, but this is the first time you're with us during the Gin Pop for Real Hand to Mouth Club podcast, video style. So I thank you so much for coming and joining me today, and I hope that we will have a lot of fun. Thank you for making that video that sort of introduced the topic at hand. If anybody is new to the stream, Michael went to the bargain bins in his home and grabbed some things, including beef heart, and is going to be showing us how he uses that ingredient to make something delicious. I love the use of cuts of meat that are not considered very traditional. I think it's a great way to save money. It often is also a good way to get a better quality of meat, because you can get something that was considered somewhat disposable, especially if you get it when they're about to throw it away, which I believe was the case here. So, Michael, take it away. Let us know what you're doing. We had a little bit of a video preamble, which I'll put on the top of this, so we'll have some idea of what's going on. But just to let everybody know what we're doing right now, where are we today? How are you? How are you, sir? Welcome.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, sir. Yes. So the video, which was put together very hastily after the shopping trip itself, actually originally going to include a little bit more information. So we kind of got up to the point where I'd seared the meat and then added some water to create the basis of a pan sauce. And then it kind of stopped there. So originally I was then going to show the process of then slow cooking. So the only thing that's been missed off of that preamble was just the addition of a little bit more water, a little bit more salt, putting some tin foil over the top of or aluminium foil over the top of the pot, and sticking it in the oven on a low temperature. So
how long did you low and slow it? For brisket I'll do overnight. I have to assume that for a heart, maybe not, but maybe. The one time I tried to do heart, I tried to do I tried to do it just sort of pan frying it, and that did not go well. It was a really, really tough, kind of a mess experience. Uh,
It is super chewy. Yeah.
so when you
And
do the low and slow, are you going for hours, or how long do you do it?
yeah, as you said, it was overnight. So I set that to 90 Celsius, which is also a Fahrenheit somewhere, and that cooked from I think about 9 o'clock last night. I put it on, and then I woke up this morning at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning and took it out, rested it for 5 or 10 minutes, cooled it very quickly, and popped it in the fridge.
Wow. All right. Well, very, very cool. Let's jump in then. So you're going to be. What is the final dish that you plan to make? I think you told me in the video, but again, I am useless.
Oh, so it's a stew, broadly. So when I was picking up the ingredients, as I was kind of going through you say the bargain bin or the discounts are, it did sort of morph a couple of times as what's available gets added to the basket, and you're sort of thinking, okay, what can I do with this? Originally, when I picked up this sort of nice big a granary cob for 6 pence, I thought, one of those things you see on the internet a lot, where they'll sort of open up the top of the bread and then pack it with ingredients, whether that's a stew or almost like a cheeseburger layered beef and cheese situation that they then carve up, which sounds really cool, but in terms of actually continuing to feed you for a while, it's not very helpful. You can't store it easily. If you keep it that long after you initially serve it, the bread's going to go soggy. So it eventually became stew. I think, as we saw in the video, I got in total the bread. It was the pig hearts that I got in the end. I got some prawn cocktail stuff, which on checking last night wasn't necessarily going to survive until today, so I ate that, and some lettuce, which again, if I was going out buying the stuff, bringing it back, cooking it straight away, I would have absolutely made like a nice little starter just with some lettuce and some prawn cocktail bits and bobs, and it's kind of appetizer. It was very big in Britain in the 70s. I don't know if it was the same in the States.
Oh, I think it definitely was in the States back in the 50s, 60s. That was sort of the era, right? Where they would really like there was something about like that ring of shellfish over a pool of ketchup mixed with horseradish sauce that just really got people going back then.
Yeah.
And these days, I feel like has it been reclaimed yet by the glitterati? Do we have Instagrammable shrimp cocktails yet? It seems like if not, then like the bejeweled shrimp tails are coming someday, right?
Yeah, that happened. So the shrimp ring equivalent of a vajazzle, I suppose, just sort of just to make it look good on Instagram.
Why eat drab shrimp when you can eat diamond shrimp? Crunch, crunch, crunch. Bleed, bleed, bleed. Hierarchy.
I've kind of looked into some of the sort of food fads that came from decades past. And I've got to say that a lot of them are really terrifyingly awful. And I don't know if that's just me, being the age I am, living in the time that I am, sort of unfairly judging them. But this habit of encasing everything in gelatin was absolutely bizarre.
That's still done. So I come from Southwest Texas, sort of rural peasant stock, and that is ground zero of the Jello salad tradition. So we still make for Christmas. There is a Jello salad that involves canned fruit cocktail, which is the lowest form of fruit.
Yeah.
Sour cream and strawberry gelatin. And those are all sort of combined and then made into a sliceable thing that is served during the savory portion of the dinner, not for dessert. Dessert, of course, you have as many pies as you have people at the dinner. But, for your pre-dessert, side dessert during your meal, you have your slice of Jello salad.
Do you have that as a savory as well?
You have it to cleanse the palate between savory bites. in much the way you might use a cranberry sauce. But actually, I am
Okay.
thinking about for Christmas this year, I'm very tempted because it is the case that gelatin is actually very inexpensive. And so there's part of me that wonders, could there be a hand to mouth in reclaiming the use of gelatin as a cheap
Bringing it back.
protein source, right? Because I mean, look, there has to be a reason that people were that obsessed with it. And now I get to some of it. It was just that it was the sort of thing that you could use as a centerpiece, and then you could show everybody how fancy and impressive you were. And I get
Yeah.
that. I get that that was very very intriguing at the time. But somewhere somehow somebody enjoyed like
Yeah. I
tuna
mean,
fish and celery floating in an aspic that was flavored like salad dressing. And that was something that people voluntarily ate. It wasn't prison food or anything. So I
yeah.
do
Yeah.
wonder if there isn't some version out there that I would be willing to eat that I've just never stumbled across. However, it also, I think, on camera might make for a fairly hilariously off-putting thing. So,
I'm game if you are, sir. Is how I leave that. I mean, I was a kid of the '90s, and my grandmother would absolutely make the kind of super um, savoury version of that. So there'd be no fruit or anything. It'd be like chunks of sausage floating around in there, and
really?
carrot. Yeah, yeah.
What is that like? I've never even tried it. Like to me, it's getting close to head cheese. I know it's not the same consistency, but it's just sort of like
Yeah,
in terms of floaty bits in a goo, you know?
yeah. It's not easy to describe other than to say like more or less as you would expect. You're eating what's it in the States? Like Jello, right? And then halfway through the Jello, there's a hot dog.
Oh,
Um,
so it's just deeply unsurprising at the end of the day. It's
yeah, I mean it looks fantastic. Because when you don't have fruit or flavor or anything in like the gelatin, of course, it just goes perfectly clear. So you can see this thing. It's like an art piece or something. But in terms of actual flavor, yeah, handabouts a perfect thing to bring it back. I think
Yeah,
it
I
would be
think
on
there's gotta
Instagram. Like,
be
yeah,
there's just gotta be a way, right? There's gotta be a way to redeem it. And maybe the answer is that it just was our parents' version of Instagram food that nobody actually enjoys eating. You know, that the
yeah,
sort of thing you just take a picture of and it looks real cool, but then you're faced with trying to eat that hamburger that was stuffed with Frito pie or whatever the hell, and it's not actually all that delicious.
exactly. And the prawn cocktail was something similar. It was super fancy. It was like, oh, look at us, we're eating seafood, and we've arranged it in this very pretty fashion. But it tasted good, so people still have it now.
Right.
I feel like maybe the gelatin loaf was too beautiful for this world.
Too pure.
Um,
It was too
yeah.
pure for this world. Mr. Entity asks, isn't jellied eel still a thing in the UK?
Oh yeah. Jelly deals are still a thing. It's considered kind of more of an old man food, but it's definitely still a thing. People still buy and eat them again without prison being involved. No threats, no nothing. They just put it in their mouth and eat it,
Yeah,
which is pretty bizarre to those that don't like it. It's not my number one, but I must confess that yeah, I've had the occasional jelly deal.
I'm curious about it. I definitely do the pickled herring. I don't really have a problem with the smoked or preserved fish. I think that's a fun way to go. Uh,
Mhm.
but it definitely has a weird sort of reputation, I feel like, in the United States. There's a lot of people that dismiss it out of hand as a possibility.
Well, we used to have. So I think I mentioned in the last stream, because of where I live in the UK, we made friends with a lot of Americans because we're quite near a couple of military bases. So a lot of NATO troops are in the area. We tend to make quite good friends before they rotate back out again. And what I've found is that the pub and bar culture is very different between our two countries. And so when I've told American friends in the past that we used to have a fish man that would come around the pub and sell pieces of fish, that's apparently a weird thing that doesn't happen in other places.
That's absolutely a
Uh,
weird thing. You're just hanging out at a
yeah,
bar and a fish man wanders through and wondering if
yeah,
anybody would care for some.
yes, yeah, yeah. And he'd be wearing like what looks like a lab coat almost, and like a little white trilby,
What?
with a hamper just full of fish.
Is it
Um,
fried fish or you like
No, it's things like jellied eels, roll mots, which is like herring that's been cooked and then filleted and wrapped around raw onion. Winkles, cockles, mussels, just in an anonymous pot that you can have for £1. It seems like a fantastic idea when you're drunk. I think it's not super common anymore.
I could see it turning into either a great idea or a great challenge, depending on the varieties offered thereof. But either way, I've got to say, if I was drunk and somebody offered me a nice piece of fish wrapped around some onion, I'd probably take it. As much as that is strange to me. But then again, in America, a lot of bars will use free popcorn or cheap hot dogs as their sales point. I think it's sort of hard to be super judgy about somebody else's bar food when yours is made out of pig face. We're all making bar food out of pig face at the end of the day, but I think we can at least bond and accept that we all eat weird foods when we're drunk. What are nachos at the end of the day? Salty. Well, yes, exactly.
We used to do the thing with peanuts as well, and so I think this study got popularised in a British newspaper that described the average amount of urine and sort of DNA leavings in the kind of communal pot of peanuts.
Oh,
and then they went very much out of vogue.
Okay, so you've kind of got some things here set up on the cutting board. Let's go over what you're about to prepare.
So for the recipe, very simply, we're going to add in some onions, some potatoes, and some carrots. Now, one of the things that missed from the video yesterday was that we popped some garlic in, and the reason I did that last night when it was slow cooking is it's not an ingredient that I'm using for the texture as part of this dish. It's purely for the flavour. And if I give it a long time to kind of seep into the meat, that's only going to be good for the end result. Whereas if I'm putting red onions in, because my wife's gluten intolerant and she doesn't do great with white onions, so we use red onions as an alternative, and they get soft really, really quickly.
I didn't realize there was that much of a distinction between white and red onions chemically. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's to do with the amount of a certain substance in there that causes sort of acidosis if you're not careful, or if your gut bacteria is set up in a certain way. So I think red onions still have it, but less of it.
Right.
But in any case, it's digested more easily. So it makes us, we end up being a little bit more imaginative with certain meals and certain ingredients. So all I'm going to do is use the one-shot steak knife to chop up these potatoes.
I'm so sorry I've done that to you. In future streams, if you want to use a regular knife, you're allowed. I don't enforce the masochism of mine on everybody, but I do appreciate the joining in the clearly ludicrous. Well,
yeah, it actually reminded me of cooking. When we weren't doing so great financially.
I think that's kind of why I picked it. It was always when I was really young and I was trying to cook for myself, there were all these things that I would see people do, and then I would try to recreate them, and I would really struggle. And I thought to myself, oh, this is because I don't have the skill set. This is because I don't know what I'm doing, so forth and so on. And then in various parts of my life, I've been gifted a piece of kitchen equipment, or I've had enough money to buy that one nice knife, etc. And you realize, oh no, it's just that in order to even begin to do something like this technique, you actually do need a razor-sharp knife and a nice pan that holds its heat, and an oven that has semi-even heating, or at the very least a Dutch oven to put in it that can more consistently hold that heat. And so all those sorts of things stack up. But at the end of the day, when I was 19, 20, living in somebody's walk-in closet, the reason that I was trying to make it work with one rusty steak knife and a hot plate was not because it was romantic. That was the limitation. I didn't have more than that. And I find, usually when I watch cooking shows, you see these really well-appointed kitchens, and I think you have chefs and other cooking professionals who have always worked with professional tools, or have for so long they take for granted that you would do so. And there's something very honest to me about what a struggle it is to just chop a plate of vegetables if you don't have a nice knife. It's a completely different experience. Now, that said,
Yeah,
if you are watching right now and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'll just do it with a steak knife, I have to point out that you can get a very crap ass knife at the grocery store for $1 that will be way easier than a steak knife. Vastly easier than a steak knife. You'll have to keep it sharp by sharpening it all the time, maybe on the concrete outside your house. I've done that before, but it is possible to do. That being said, part of the point to drive home here is if I did it with a steak knife, you can do it with that crappy knife you got at IKEA.
indeed. And I'd also say when, like yourself, when you didn't have the equipment, our thing, rather than a steak knife, is we had a carving knife, which I think was a little bit closer to maybe the one that you were using in your last stream. But it was basically like, I guess it was kind of like a bread knife, except the serrations were far, far smaller.
Yeah, that's
and I
that's
think
the literal. That is a kind of a steak knife. Obviously, some steak knives are more sharp or better suited to actually cutting through meat. This is literally. I don't know where that knife came from, if I'm being honest. I'm pretty sure it predates SMBC Theater. I think it's just like I just went in and asked myself, what is the worst knife I own? Just categorically, that isn't just a butter knife, because that feels like at that point you're not being intellectually fair. Nobody's going to try to cut through vegetables with a butter knife. But barring butter knife, what is the worst thing I could do to myself? And that was the knife I picked.
Yeah, and I think it's important to do that because, like you say, although someone that's actually trying to use one of the recipes may not be using this exact thing, they'll almost certainly be using something that's not ideal. And seeing the stream and seeing someone struggling with something, even though it's not the same thing that they're necessarily struggling with, I think it's good to see that. I think back to trying to make sushi with a bread knife and then thinking, oh, I guess I can't cook.
Exactly, right? Or there's this whole almost attempt to convince you that it's too hard to cook by not explaining that your tools make a difference. And also, frankly, there are whole categories of meals where the idea of needing things to be perfectly chopped, or everything needs to be the same size, or you need to julienne it for whatever particular distinct reason, all of which are valid. They're the real dishes that need it. There's a lot of dishes like stew where it pretty much boils down into make it into pieces, put it in the pot. And there you really can have lesser tools, so to speak, and still make something very delicious.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm doing here now as well is pretty much what I was doing with the meat, in that I'm just taking the potatoes that I've got here and frying them off so they've got some of that brown on them. Because if you just stew them straight up, you can end up in a situation where they're very pale and quite not flavourless, because you're going to have stock in there, but it's just you'll end up missing out on a little bit more flavour that you can get for free by frying it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, from what I've learned from stews, essentially the whole game is to almost burn everything and then boil it. So yeah, the more you get that brown on the bottom of the pan and all over everything, the more flavor you get at the end. Unlike the stew that Chasen Chaffin used to make when he was 19, which was literally hunks of beef boiled in water with broken up pieces of pasta noodle and carrot, and he's going to kill me for revealing that on the podcast later. But it's true, and we both ate it multiple times while telling ourselves it wasn't that bad, and it was that bad. When you tell yourself, well, if we just make the water salty, we'll at least be able to choke it down, you're already in a bad place.
I mean, I already got in trouble with my dad, actually, because he watched the last stream where I revealed that he would cycle through hot dogs and burgers from his freezer like one day after the other to vary his diet. Although he did let me know that the third thing was fish fingers, which I don't know if that's a huge thing in the States. But
we call them fish sticks. Steak comes in fingers, fish comes in sticks, chicken comes in tenders, fingers, or nuggets.
So see, we do have fish sticks, the kind of red and white surimi processed thing. The fish finger is just a fish fillet that's been breaded. So it's like an oblong fish and chips type situation.
Okay. So that would just be like we would just call that a fried fish fillet. I don't think we would go finger for that. Usually for finger in the United States, it's gotta be credibly look like a finger. We have standards in America for nothing except for our chicken fingers. Only our chicken fingers require any kind of standard.
I'm going to stop putting my hand into a hot pan now and actually get that spoon.
What could go wrong? I've done that 1,000 times, and it's only burned me multiple times on many occasions.
But now when it happens, it's a learning experience for more than just the person doing it. So it's doubly worth it. I know a lot of stuff about lard now.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do really enjoy digging into some of these kind of old ingredients that I wouldn't think about. Actually, really, I love that you're doing beef heart for that reason, because, as I said, my one attempt at beef heart really failed. It was dog treats fail level. And that was all right. Leia was very happy with me for about a month and a half because that's what she got for her dog treats. But I felt very disappointed in myself because I'd been very excited to think that I might have a new favorite kind of meat that's very affordable, and it just didn't go well at all for me. So I'm very excited. So is this the heart here in your hands? Do you have your heart in your hands right now?
It is indeed. I'm holding my multiple hearts in my hands. Which I don't know how you can see.
Yeah, there you go. It kind of like I feel like all organs start looking kind of similar once you chop them up and fry them. Like liver, heart. I'm sure I'm wrong, but there's something about they all just end up kind of brown and squiggly a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this it's I don't know if you can see this, but it's not very chewy at all now because it's been done low and slow. It just separates out like any other flesh would. Flavor-wise, it is not like pork. Is the headline. As I expect it to be. It's closer almost to kidney, I guess, like from a steak and kidney pie. And all that's been done with is a little bit of garlic, some salt and pepper, and the pan sauce, as you saw on the kind of pre-roll. So that's come out really well. It's come out really tender and not especially chewy. So I think if you're dealing with something like this, it's a heart. It's moving for the life of the animal, so it's going to be tougher. So low and slow is probably going to help that out.
Well, I mean, my people cook brisket as one of the core cuts of the cow that they eat, and that is, of course, is another low and slow. So I'm very much from that realm. Although I don't think you're allowed to barbecue a cow heart, are you? Would it barbecue? Could you barbecue a cow heart? I don't know. I should look that up.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, when you say barbecue, I know that means something different to what we generally have in Britain, which is poultry by comparison.
Do you guys do do you think of something over a hot fire as counting as barbecue? That's the usual sin that is created in the north of America where they don't understand it. Yeah. So barbecue, where I'm from, usually means a very low and slow process. In traditional spaces, you would dig a pit and put coals in it and put your meat in it and then bury the whole thing for a day. That is less common now because it's kind of a big pain in the butt. So you see people doing smokers outdoors. You can also, though, do a lot. You can get pretty close indoors in an oven if you know what you're doing. You're not going to get quite that smokiness. You have to bring that smokiness in from some other quadrant somehow, maybe from a seasoning with smoked paprika or something like that, just to get that element going. But you can make a very good brisket in the oven, obviously. But yeah, barbecuing typically in Texas is low, slow, with an element of smoke to create that sort of crust or ring around the meat.
Yeah, I would imagine that would do very well with a heart. Just from the sort of flavour I'm getting here, although for the most part across Britain we don't do barbecue properly. We do, as you were saying, essentially cooking over a campfire, which is good for s'mores, not so great for brisket. So I think if you're going to do it properly, and especially with a smoker or something like that, low and slow over the course of a day, that would be absolutely delicious.
Absolutely. And as Chad is saying, Alton Brown has said that there's nothing specifically wrong with using liquid smoke, and you are not a sinner if you do so. My Texas disagrees with his, but he is from Georgia. But then again, Georgia thinks they know how to make barbecue and they don't. Sorry, I just got American on you there for a moment. In any case, it is probably the case that nobody will show up at your house and take it away from you if you decide to use liquid smoke. However, I do have to say it is an added expense. I think it's. I don't know how much it costs. I've never bought it because I'm from Texas and I have dignity, but I think it must be more money than you need to add to something. And if for my money, I would rather have the smoked paprika for most things. Although I guess if you don't want the paprika taste, that's up to you.
I suppose you could, in theory, make your own liquid smoke.
You could. I guess you could. I've never tried it, but yeah, there's nothing keeping it.
Condense the smoke from a barbecue that you're doing and collect it, I guess.
Ooh, barbecued alligator. That does sound good, Wandering Mage. I would totally try that. I've only really had alligator in nugget form. I think when people serve alligator outside of places where they honestly eat alligator, they're usually doing it as a novelty, and they usually just try to make it taste as much like chicken with some sort of a dipping sauce as they possibly can. I've come across it just roasted a few times here or there, and it is a tasty meat. It's weird. It's much more like frog than it is like chicken, which I suppose makes some sense.
Yeah, we have a restaurant here that does a lot of novelty meats kind of things. It turns out I really like llama, which...
llama? Really? I've never tried llama.
Llama's good. Ostrich as well is pretty nice. They're quite dark meats, quite sweet. But it's one of those places where they give you like a really hot rock and you sort of cook your own thing. To taste, and so yeah, they are really good. Right, so those potatoes, I'll just bring those up to the camera. So they've started to brown quite well.
Here you go. Yeah, you've got kind of that crust forming on the bottom of the pan just a little bit, all that kind of good crumbly flavor action. I assume we're deglazing, or are we continuing to roast? Are we going deeper?
No, we will be shortly. So I'm just going to add the onions and carrots to start them cooking, and then pour the little bit of liquid that's formed inside the heart around the pieces of heart in the fridge, and what that'll do is just pull that brown up off the bottom of the pan, add to the flavors. I've also got a leftover stock in the freezer in a bag that was from a lamb stew a few months ago. So at the end of the meal, I just noticed there was a lot more liquid than we'd used in the meal, and I stuck it in the freezer. So I'll add that in to add some more liquid.
Love it.
Then it'll be ready to simmer.
That sounds awesome. I love the use of old leftovers incorporating into new leftovers. That is the key to not being overwhelmed. Originally I had actually considered using my mystery Tupperware here on stream and to do that with you while you were doing yours. But I thought, let's focus. Let's do the mystery Tupperware another time because I think it's a fun one. But definitely for the most part, actually, the last couple of hand-to-mouths have largely been my digging into my freezer and asking myself, what have I been dishonest with myself about? What have I avoided? What have I not used? What's been sitting here for a year waiting for me to get around to it? And I've really enjoyed being kept honest in that way. And I think that, it's so important not to forget what you've stored in the freezer. It's so easy to lose track of. And you'll find, after 3 weeks, you're probably okay to revisit a dish that you had earlier in the month.
Yeah, indeed. I also thought what I'd do was not be sensible about it, and to simulate I need to actually cook something, and not actually defrost the stock that I know I have in my freezer. So I've been sitting next to it thinking that would be really helpful if I defrosted it right now. It's one of those things where, because the meat's been in the fridge, that's currently at a safe temperature. The pan is very hot. If I leave it there too long, it's going to warm the meat up to an unsafe temperature. It's going to be in the danger zone for too long. So the trick is to, at this time, just after I've added it in, while it's still cool, then add the ice in. So as that's melting into the ingredients, it will start low, bring the meat down to a low temperature, and then everything will come up together to then cook, be safe, and everything else. If you bring the whole thing to a boil and then dunk it in, that's actually worse for you because you're spending more time in that danger zone.
Oh, interesting. That's a great tip. I like that. Also, it requires less effort and prep, which I constantly search for in my own life, and I think for hand to mouth as well, because I think so much of the day to day experience of being broke has to do with stress management at the end of the day. And some of that has to do with setting yourself up for success by having something that is easy to choose to do at the when it comes to food, as opposed to making yourself yet another challenge to overcome that day. So I think that's really great.
I will say that this is to some extent indicative of me not being as broke as I once was, in that I'm using actually a kind of convenient little food bag or freezer bag to store this in, whereas in the past it would have been absolutely like an old takeaway container that I'd gotten from a Chinese a year and a half ago and been meticulously washing up ever since.
No, yeah, I've had a couple of those in my time. It is an amazing day when you think that you're free of them, and send them on their way, and think I'm a Ziploc boy now.
Yeah, I'm so rich. I'm affording sandwich bags.
Right. I've entered the sandwich bag chapter of my life.
Just phone my dad and tell him. Oh yeah, wow, it's going so well.
That's right. Mom, set your fears aside. It's all gonna be fine. I put my leftover broth in Ziploc bags now. That's right. I'm not just using empty soda cans anymore, capped with a crumpled piece of aluminum foil. No. I'm misusing a different cheap item.
It's weird though. I mean, even when you're not in that situation anymore, and you're not sort of like really having to stretch every penny, the mentality never leaves. And so even to this day, sometimes I look at myself and go, "Oh man, these are like the nice ones as well. They've got like they've got the little plastic thing at the top where you can open and close it. This is a luxury I do not deserve."
You go into a house, when I was a kid, if I went into a house and they had those kind of bags, inevitably, they also had like a super well maintained and organized pantry with all kinds of brands of pasta I'd never heard of before and all kinds of nice things. Usually they were actually unpacked and not just living out of cardboard boxes in the middle of one crap apartment or another. Like they seem to have their life together, is what I'm saying. That little Ziploc zippy thing seemed to be an indication that everything was going to be okay. We did the sandwich bag twist tie in my household that doesn't quite keep the air out, but does keep the roaches out. So, you know.
Did you have a place for the twist ties as well?
Oh yeah, you don't throw those away. Those are money.
You twist two of them together, you can do something else with them as well. They're amazing.
You twist 5 of them together, and that's your television antenna. I wish I was kidding.
It's the and it's good in a way because it gives you problem solving.
I think it does. I think if you can. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said something to me that I found that was very resonant, which was he said, imagine what it would be like to grow up assuming things are mostly going to work out for you, and just what that does to the way that you approach life and the way that you do things, which is something I'll never have, right? Like I just don't have it. I assume that things are going to be hard. I assume that people don't like me a lot of the time. I assume that there's going to be 1,000 complications. And there are ways in which that does keep me alive, in part because I'm so used to being at the point where I'm just trying to figure out how to not end up not alive, if that makes sense, that it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where I feel that things are going to be bad, and then they are bad. I focus on it exclusively, but I'm ready for it to be bad. Now, the only problem that I've found with that as I've gotten older and older is that it means you live in this constant state of things are bad because you're either anticipating the problem or ruminating about how you dealt with the last one. And it is almost like you run into a different species when you run into somebody who just had the sort of slumber party, nice school, happy parents kind of existence, and just like you'll try to explain that maybe you're scared about something, and I think there's a level to which they can't quite get it. Or don't quite understand what you're talking about when you say that you're worried about something. So I have a complicated relationship with that sort of thing, in that I do find that the mindset has probably helped me in a lot of times and has kept me on my feet and lets me be agile and lets me be effective. But I do wonder if it isn't wearing me out sometimes. If the fact that I can't relax, that I can't, for instance, I find it very hard to celebrate successes, right? Other people throw parties for themselves when they do well, and I keep working. And for a long time, I thought about that as if it were some sort of personality highlight. Like this was a strength of mine. Oh, other people need to celebrate, but me, I'm so tough. I just need to keep going. And then you get older and you realize, oh no, this is a dramatic sign of extreme weakness that is holding me back in some very fundamental ways. And I have to disentangle that mess if I'm going to get better. And so I think that has been part of my project over the last 10 years, and something that has redefined my relationship to poverty in that time, is sort of understanding what it actually did and what it didn't. Anyway, to go off on a horrible tangent, but it looks like you got everything in the pot while I chit-chatted.
Nothing major's happened. I've just so that's now coming up to temperature. The stock that I've put in there that I failed to defrost before the beginning of the cook is now absolutely fine, bubbling away quite merrily. I have used a ridiculous piece of kitchen equipment that you may not have, a pot lid.
How dare you? That can easily be replaced either with a plate that will burn your hand when you try to remove it, or a piece of tin foil that will not, but you'll then waste tin foil. So really up to you, depending on your situation.
Yeah, if you're going to go with a plate, I would recommend stoneware, and I would recommend that you use either kitchen gloves or several tea towels when touching it, because it will be the hottest thing, really, that you're ever going to go to touch in a kitchen environment.
It'd be one of those things where you feel dumb about yourself when you do it. And now I remove the right.
Pain, yes. I deserve that. So the other weird thing about this recipe, which it's the romaine lettuce. So I got this originally and said, like, that would go with the prawn cocktail, as we were discussing.
Sure.
I then had a quick just Google around about how you would cook romaine lettuce, and outside of a lettuce soup or something like that, as an ingredient, thinking that I could chop this up, add it into the dish just before it's served, in essence, to give it a little bit more crunch. But because of the type of leaf you get on this, it's actually quite common to chop this up and add it in half an hour before you serve the meal, and just to let it simmer and tenderize for half an hour.
Whoa, hold on. Wait a minute. I was with you. I was just popping along on the Michael train there, and then you brought up boiling romaine lettuce, and I have to pump my brakes and just double check with you. So we're just chopping up romaine lettuce and tossing that in and making it part of the soup?
We are indeed.
And that was the bargain bin romaine, so I have to assume that that's looking a little wilty. So this is something you could do with romaine lettuce that was starting to go south on you.
Exactly. Okay. I would argue that if you were to eat that just raw, it would probably be a bit wilty and taste a little bit off. But if you're using it as an ingredient and you're cooking it, then it's absolutely fine. If I wasn't able to find the pig heart that I've got in here, it probably would have been the base of a lettuce soup, where you just chop it up super fine with your steak knife, and then put some salt and stock in there and simmer it on a low heat for a half hour.
How far away is lettuce soup from the toast sandwich? For instance, would you say that a toast sandwich and lettuce soup lunch is the definition of uh-oh? Like, is that a warning sign? Is there some bell that goes off?
There was a time in my life where I ate an entire head of lettuce. So I'd say there's still a couple of steps down to uh-oh territory. At least you're you're giving the illusion of a meal if you're making a soup out of it.
It's true. You haven't hit nutritional paste yet.
Iceberg lettuce is round. It's difficult to get through. It's not like sandwich shaped. But you know what? It was a very warm day. I was hungry, and I also wanted to be.
Were you just
quenched.
trying to mimic a horse? You're just like, this is my impersonation of a horse.
Yeah, but when cartoon characters eat, they seem really happy about it. It turns out if you emulate their eating style, it's not actually as satisfying as you might think. So,
I discovered that with that loaf of bread that I made for myself during the Kickstarter, my first loaf of bread, which I finally allowed myself to do the thing I'd always wanted to do with a fresh loaf of bread, which was just pick it up like I'm a cartoon gremlin and shove it in my mouth and take a giant bite out of it. And what I learned was that you just end up with a whole lot of bread in your mouth. It actually kind of sucks. And then you just have to sort of sit there soldiering through and chawing on it like you're chewing on tobacco until you can vaguely choke down the sawdust. So
yeah, being an adult. I mean,
it's one of those where you're like, this is going to be funny. I think you can appreciate this. You're a comedian. It's like you think like, oh, this is going to be funny because the concept of this is hilarious. Like the mental image, the 2-second mental image in my head is very funny. And then when you do it in physicality, you remember that you are a meat person in a physical space and that there are consequences to your actions. And suddenly you're just stuck with like, oh, wait, it was very funny when I filled the bowl with Kool-Aid and lard, but now I'm actually holding the bowl of Kool-Aid and lard, and this is taking on a whole different tone.
Yeah. Oh, shit, this is real. God, damn it. I thought I was writing a screenplay, but this is actually my life.
Yeah. Oh, this was so hilarious right up until I had to continue to be here. If I could leave right now and we could just all hold like that last sentence that I said, just amber. Just put that in amber and I'm going to walk away. You don't know. Don't look at me. Do not look at me. Don't watch me walk away.
That's the benefit of the stage, I guess. If you're starting to deal with consequences and stuff, you can just leave.
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's the best thing in the world. So the chat is saying that they're also into grilled lettuce. Mr. Entity says grilled lettuce is awesome. I feel like that's one of those things that still has some level of controversy around it. You see people that I think are very anti grilling lettuce sometimes. I don't really have a problem with it. I imagine like anything, there's probably very bad versions out there. But if you do it right, it's mostly just getting a little bit of char on something that stays relatively fresh, right? So, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But this isn't even doing. You're not. Are you grilling this, or are you just straight up throwing this in the pot, right?
Yeah, this is something I'm just going to be throwing straight in the pot. The main reason for that again is just to keep it as simple as possible, keep it on the one pot thing. But if I was cooking it for myself, I probably would be tempted to get a hot pan and just brown it off for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, just so it's got that again,
just a little bit of that wilt on it. Yeah, I can see that.
But again, from what we've got here, between the very rich pig hearts, which are then browned and slow cooked, and the sort of brown marks on the potatoes and everything else, we've actually got a very rich stew already. See if I can.
Oh man, look at that! Now that is something I remember from the one time that I did work with Hart, is that it did make a very unctuous sort of drippings. So definitely there's a lot flavor, there's a lot of texture in there that'll leave it feeling very stick to your ribs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually thinking when I add the lettuce, that's going to add a lot of water into the equation as well. So, I think it's rich enough that it'll be okay. Most might maybe a pinch more salt, but I don't want to overdo the sodium. But I think we'll be good. So this next bit now, I'd basically be simmering it until the carrots and the potatoes are done. Add the lettuce, do it for 10 minutes, and then serve it. So I'm happy to sort of keep talking through, but there's no more active cooking to take place for a little while.
I love it. Well, let's just chat then while it comes together. I think that's great. I think this is exactly the kind of dish that I want to do, and I want to encourage people to consider. When you see there's so much desperate need for things to be photographable that I think we're losing the simple dishes that keep us going week to week. You know, I don't need something that looks picture perfect every night. I do need something that tastes good and makes me feel good about where I am. And I think that that kind of stew is exactly the kind of technique. I mean, most of the meals that I make for my family during the week are one pan or one pot meals. Most of them involve two or three or four ingredients that can all be put in a pan, either in quick succession or all at the same time. It's just like, because when you've got a kid or you've got a life or you've got a job, you just don't have time for 2 hours of prep and an entire kitchen full of dirty dishes that you now are in charge of cleaning after having cooked everything. So, you know, when I was a bachelor, I mostly cooked and ate out of just one pot. Like, that was kind of what all my meals went into and came out of. And I almost didn't have bowls or plates for a long time. Bowls and plates are nice. They let you know that you're not, you know, feral. But yeah, I think there's a huge benefit to really mastering the techniques that let you use as little as possible in the kitchen, so that you're really creating as little of a job for yourself. I have a feeling that many of the people that are watching and sharing with us are all have enough going on, let's say, and don't need more chores or more stress or more responsibility. The hope is that by cooking for yourself, we're able to reduce that a little bit. So Michael, tell me a little bit about kind of where you got started, because I know from the Kickstarter Hangout and from this Hangout that you're coming from a place of having actually dealt with some of this and had to teach yourself this kind of stuff. So I love that side of it. So Lord, you seem like you're younger than me, but you have a teenage daughter. So as a Sherlock Holmes, that suggests that at some point you were a very screwed young man.
I am. So I'm 33. So I turned 33 this year.
Okay. And daughter is 13?
15.
15.
Now she's my stepdaughter. I will say. So I was kind of on the scene from when she was around 3 or 4 years old. So I was in my early 20s. I'd moved out of home. I didn't have any skills particularly, due to a lot of very silly decisions during my teen years. I had no qualifications. I hadn't gone to college or university. I'd been expelled from school. In fact, I'd been turned down for a job parking trolleys. I'd spent a few years kind of freelancing in London and doing like graphic design and sort of halfway creative-y stuff where I could, because unbeknownst to me at the time, I also had pretty severe undiagnosed ADHD, so I found it very difficult to stick to any kind of routine, turn up to things on time. The 9-to-5 job was very stressful and very difficult for me for reasons I couldn't really understand. So yeah, I found myself in quite an awkward position when I first sort of moved out of the family home. I moved about 100 miles away, settling into a new job. I made about £7 an hour at the time. My partner made about £8.50, which is not enough really. For us
not even close.
Yeah. So, and again, working all the hours that I possibly could, getting all the overtime that I possibly could. I was working on the phones on an IT help desk. And
I've done that job. Well, I didn't do IT help, but I've done the incoming telemarketing job, and that's brutal. There's nothing quite for society to really reinforce that they don't care about you. Working that job is pointed. Just like hey, we're just gonna make you the whipping boy for everyone all day. That's when I got up to smoking 2 packs a day when I was 18. That's when I worked in that gig. Yeah.
Weirdly, similarly, again, a lot of really silly decisions when I was a kid. But yeah, I got up to about 2 packs of Marlboro Reds maybe when I was about 15, and that was still going on around that time. So and they were really expensive. That was really part of my budget.
It's one of those things that's at this point especially almost exclusively marketed towards people that are under massive financial distress, because it is essentially a cheap and legal version of self-medication that exists. I mean, it has horrible drawbacks, but they don't care because they make money. But you know, I have to say, it was one of those tells for me. I didn't meet a lot of rich kids that had a serious smoking habit. Maybe they smoked cloves, or they had like a pack of Nat Shermans as an affectation. But if you met somebody who was drinking unfiltered Luckies, that person didn't come from money most of the time.
Yeah. I remembered again. I wasn't lucky. So I was Marlboro Reds, but
I was
I
Marlboro
had
Red
the
Lights because those are good for you.
yeah. Well, my first job, I got. We used to work with a load of guys from Nanjing in China, and they brought over these cigarettes called Yip in May, and they were like someone on a hot summer's day had like got some of the tar off of the road and like rolled it up in paper. They were like horrendous.
Whew.
And I remember coming from this you know smoking Marlboros and all that, just going back to those and going like, oh wow, these are really light. I like these.
Uh-oh. No, I
um,
should say to everybody, it has now been 8 years since I last smoked a cigarette. I quit when I was 30. And if you are smoking out there, you should quit too. It is amazing how much better you'll feel if you do. And you will be shocked as to how bad you smelled when you did, once you stopped for even just a little while. I still, right after I quit, there was that year or two where there were still some clothes that had the scent in them. And I would put on an old jacket or an old, something that had been wadded up in the back of the closet for a little bit. And there would just be this reek of sad pool halls and lonely ladies in Vegas. And you just say, oh, I smelled like that for a decade. I did that just voluntarily.
and and it was also like somehow when you're smoking, because you like that smell, because your brain associates it with, oh, I'm about to get that drug that I'm addicted to,
Yeah.
and like in your mind it's almost tantamount to like a campfire or camphor wood, and you're just like, oh, it's a lovely. So and then you smell it and you're like, oh, no, it's this horrible kind of organic, sort of like someone's got a really bad cold and they coughed into a fire, like it's this awful slimy scent.
Yeah. Yeah, it smells
Yeah,
it smells like sad lonely grandpa. It's just that sort of like, oh, you just nobody wants to hang out with you kind of a thing.
So yeah, at the time I was making no money. I was adjusting to learning life skills, so learning how to work a washing machine, learning how to cook for myself, learning how to wake myself up every morning, iron all my clothes, ready for my office job, getting into my office job on time, because if you were 10 seconds late, that was a mark against you. I was also learning to be a partner. I was learning to be a stepfather. And yeah, I had this undiagnosed learning disability on top of it, which was complicating everything. So to say that there was some stress in the household would be fair, I think. A lot of a lot of it was because we had our daughter, and when someone's 5 years old, you can't feed them ramen and live with yourself.
No, you
I
can't.
suppose.
I have actually had that experience. I mean, Arthur, my son, is only 2.5. He's not 5 yet, but he's already old enough that if I let him, he would exist exclusively off of cupcakes and Hostess Twinkies and
Yeah.
just like the worst of foods. And we're still making sure he eats good whole foods. I mean, a lot of. I'm very, very grateful that I developed the skill set I did before I had him, because we had something to lean on when we hit this point. But I sometimes will eat something and hide it from him because I know he'd want it, and I think it's beneath him to eat. And there's always that moment where you catch yourself and you're like, wait, what about you? Hold on. Isn't.
Don't get me wrong, I'm sure I've done a lot wrong as a father in my time. In fact, I'm certain that I have. I remember just at the time, my thing that I was always super aware of was food. I'd been raised without huge amounts of frozen chicken nuggets and ramen and stuff. It was something that we ate. I would absolutely have a packet of ramen for lunch growing up. But the sort of money we were on, if it was just the two of us, there's a total possibility that would have been every now and then the thing that we had all 3 meals.
Hugely tempting, sure, absolutely. And I've been there. Like, look, when I was in my early 20s, my biggest responsibility was essentially not drowning in bathtubs while drunk. If I nailed that, I was doing just fine in my early 20s, right? So I was not responsible for a human life, and thank goodness no one should have trusted me with a garden plant back then. Now, to make it clear, at the same age that you're talking about, I was living in a bachelor apartment with Zach Wiener and his girlfriend at the time and their unspayed male cat, with no kitchen, and we would shirtless paint robot paintings all day to relieve stress. That was my responsibility load at that age, and frankly, I think I had too much responsibility even with that. So the idea of somebody being like, "Hey, don't kill it. Here's a human life," like just how challenging it has been in the last 2 years when I'm in my mid 30s and know a lot more about myself and had a lot more time to figure myself out, and frankly, still failed and got caught flat-footed because you're never ready. But at least had the shot at it at 20. Oh no, I can't even begin to imagine. But yes. Certainly, I've eaten the three ramen deals, and I can see how when you have that child staring at you, that suddenly there's a guilt of, oh, I'm building a person, and if I don't give them nutrition, that's forever. I'm creating the forever sin that you don't escape. That is part of poverty for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people struggle with developmental issues for the rest of their lives because they did not have access to a decent childhood. That is just true. But when you're right there at the front line, you're kind of like, ugh. I can learn how to cook a tomato, right? I could do that. I could do that much.
I think the first thing that we ever did, really, like cooking wise, was we'd make spaghetti or lasagna or something, and you'd get like the cheap pre-made pasta sauce, and we'd put it in, and then we get the cheap mince and put that in, and then we'd go, okay, now here's for the clever bit, and we'd put like some tomato puree or, or some pepper, or something like that, and be like, oh yeah, we're making this our own, and then it just sort of evolved from there. And finding the things that we could do cheaply, and we could make again and again, change a little bit, and learning all those skills.
I remember 100%. That is, to me, that's what I want the ethos of Hand to Mouth to be. Way more than finalized recipes or this is what's right or it should be this. It is that. It's if you're willing to experiment, if you're willing to fail, if you're willing to make a bad dish and eat it anyway once or twice, you can get to a point where you live way better than if you just take the sort of subsistence, convenience, prepackaged food that is offered to people that are broke. Like ramen is tasty, but there's nothing in it. I've tried it. I've tried to live off ramen for a couple weeks when I was in my 20s. That made me feel bad. I can't even fathom what it would do to me now. Hangovers last for 3 days. I have a feeling ramen hangovers would last a month.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I've got 30s and Asian. Like hangovers are like I just don't drink anymore.
Me either. Honestly, I don't. I don't find it worth it at this point. I find it like I'm too tired for too long afterward. But I certainly don't begrudge those who drink. Chasen will never stop.
Sounded very ominous. I'm going to be really like SMBCE dorky now. Just ask a question. You mentioned the robot paintings there. Were they possibly the ones that were like behind the kid in the Your Parents Are Getting Back Together skit?
One of them is. So one of them, and you've frozen on the video, but I can still hear you. So we're going to keep going and hope the video kind of unsticks itself, because I think it did last time too. Yes, so one of them is a painting that Chasen owns. It's the one with the hot dogs coming out of the head. That one is by a local Houston artist I forget the name of, but I can have Chasen link it. He's a really cool artist. Chasen has a few of their paintings. There's just one of those that we had. The other one is one that Zach actually painted with me and then gave to me. That's of like a robot looking up at the sky at a little star. And that one actually is now in my son's room. I hang that up. I still have that. That's like kind of one of those special keepsakes to me. I like to fold in old artifacts and personal things into the work that I do. I find it helps me connect to it emotionally and contextualize it. So I do a lot of that in SMBC theater. You'll find like little like images and paintings and whatnot. There you are. You're back. We unclipped while I talked. Boom.
I've had to switch to my dreadful laptop camera, which is over here, rather than the nice one that I got set up using that Droidcam software that sort of arranged for this. So the picture quality is going to go down, but it won't require me to go faff over there and figure out what exactly went wrong.
Perfect, no worries.
Let's see.
It's hand to mouth. We don't kowtow to production value.
Production values.
Also, it's a video podcast, and I've looked at video podcasts, and man, the video part of that is flexible.
Well, especially now, there's a lot of driven amateur creative performery type people that are now jumping online and getting on the bandwagon. So I think now's a good time to start out that kind of production.
I do too. Well, and I think it just comes down to what you're making. If I was trying to make ESPN sports, this would not be the way I would go about it. But if I'm trying to make a sort of don't take yourself too seriously, have a comic attitude, but help people and help take care of people and encourage a community to form around that, a little rough and tumble around the edges just feels realistic. It feels kind of like what it would be, you know? If everybody had HK cameras and we could project in 3D, on a certain level as an audience member, I would not trust me. You know, there's a little bit of, like, I have that sense about this a little bit. Like at a certain point, like if I came swooping in with a dolly shot and was like, "Welcome to Hand to Mouth. I know being broke sucks, and this costs $200,000." Like there's a little bit of a disconnect in what you're trying to say. You know, and so I find we've just sort of like we kind of wanted to do this 7-8 years ago, and it was just a little bit too hard to do it consistently and to have enough control over it to be able to assure that it was going to be a really good experience for the audience every time. And I feel like over that 7 years, with some of the technologies sort of getting a little stronger and the consumption of media maturing a little bit in the process, we've really hit this point where you really can build a community around sharing knowledge and comfort and camaraderie in a way that it didn't exist before. And frankly, a lot of those communities suck now because the internet kind of sucks now. So I see hand to mouth over time as being an opportunity to sort of collect people that don't suck. And I'm excited by it. It's been kind of amazing over these first few weeks.
I mean, I think, yeah, if you look at when SMBC Theatre was first around, I mean, and this has been one of the strangest things about joining on this project, is that you're one of the internet celebrities from that age. True Enough TV, the early college humor skits are all from
I've
that kind of
decided
era.
to call it the golden age of YouTube, and nobody has corrected me yet. So I'm just gonna, I'm clearly not just referring to SMBC Theater, but sort of the time when we all thought YouTube might make a space for creative, independent, idiosyncratic voices that did films, short films, experimental films, that kind of thing. Yeah, before YouTube kind of figured out that what makes money for them, what makes sense for them is essentially the vlogging, talking head format. It's about the only thing that makes sense on YouTube long term if you're going to try to do it in a way that isn't somewhat predatory either on the people making it or the people consuming it.
Yeah, indeed. I think a lot of the work that came out around that time was kind of like that a little bit more. It was a little bit more raw, a little bit more Wild West. Things were a little bit more strange and idiosyncratic back then.
Yeah, my buddies, 5-second films. I think we're kind of in that ethos. It's why we got along so well. Is there was a little bit more of a somewhere between like a vaudevillian roadshow shoestring black box kind of vibe and a punk rock vibe where you were just trying to like do something more interesting than you could get in typical spaces and say something that you couldn't say in typical spaces. And it felt like YouTube was a place where you could get away with things. And it no longer feels quite like that. It's a fine place for finding audience if you have particular products or particular things that are valuable to the algorithm. But for the most part, I don't think of YouTube as an experimental space anymore. I don't know where on the internet I do think of as being that, other than individual creators that maybe have their own little fiefdom. Either on a Patreon or a Kickstarter or, a particularly active Instagram or Facebook or what have you. But I
I know.
really, I've been enjoying the hell, and I know that it probably keeps the community a little bit smaller for now. But I kind of don't care because I also want us to have enough time to figure out who we are. But I really enjoy being sort of all over the place as to what platform we're on, because I feel like at this point too, over the last 7 years, there are certain people that only use one platform. So, for instance, I just did things on the old YouTube channel, which there might be some sort of seductive aspect to. There's certainly a lot of people there, but there's a lot of young people on Twitch that are never going to discover us if we just stay on YouTube. One. And I think that, also with the old YouTube channel, I think I want to keep that to be a little bit more edited just because I think that's what the audience kind of came to expect on it. And I don't want to drive people away so that they don't experience everything. But I do really want to thank, we've had almost 100 people come through and check out the podcast from last week. And that's awesome for podcast numbers. That's something actually I want to post in the Discord, because there's going to be, it's hard for people. This is something I've been doing for the last 7 years. I've been working with independent artists and other creators on starting their communities, starting kind of getting their first footholds into developing an audience and that kind of thing. And when you come from sort of the early 2000s, even mid 2000s mindset of just shock and awe when it came to subscriber numbers, when it came to viewership and that kind of thing, I will take a video that garners 600 very engaged views over a video that gets 400,000 minimally engaged views any day of the week. And for the podcast, anybody who saw that podcast last week, it means they watched the video on YouTube and they liked it well enough to say, another hour and a half of that, sign me up. And then a ton of them listened to that whole hour and a half. Now, those are people that are on our pirate ship, so to speak. And I really like that we have that many people that are that interested in finding new ways to make dirty jokes and help people.
I think sometimes when you work in comedy, you think maybe that's the last way to make a dirty joke. Maybe we've got to the end of it.
I actually do. I do feel like on a certain level, the way things have escalated over the last few years, it just feels like we've pushed past the boundary where irony or smug cynicism does anything for anybody. And that doesn't mean that you can't still be weird and dirty and dark or, whatever version of funny or whatever personality you are. But this idea that you can just be like, aren't things terrible? Ha ha! Is kind of out the window. Like, thanks, I get it. I can look out my window too. Yes, I see the winged horned monkeys. Make me feel better about the winged horned monkeys. They're coming. They're closer now. I see their teeth.
Yeah, and that's what the art form should be. Something nice to make you smile as the chewing process of the fanged monkeys does take place.
Yeah, well, without failing to recognize it or demean or down talk to people about it. I mean, I have to say, it's something I loved about my podcast with Mr. Entity last week. Mr. Entity, who will be hosting the post-stream hangout today. And it's something that I love about hanging out with you is that I just really like that this audience includes people who know what I'm talking about personally, because there is no way to pretend. I think you can tell. Like when I watch somebody pretending to talk about poverty like they know what they're talking about, and it's clear that they just grew up in a very comfortable, sheltered life, there is part of me that just wants to scream. It just feels like, come on. Like it's not that I need to be talked to like a kindergartner. Like I got 8-balled when I was 2, and I'm trying to claw my way out of a gravel pit while you're skipping around on solid ground. So how about you stop telling me about how I need to just like not buy a latte? And
that's been fun. The funny thing is, now I'm sort of out the other side of that period in my life when I talk to people who, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel that perhaps would have had that point of view had they met me 10 years ago. And I say things, that the big one specifically being the payday loans to pay rent concept.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, wow, that's crazy.
Does a person do that? Not voluntarily.
Whereas I feel like if it was still going on, or if they were talking to me when I was 20, the response wouldn't have been like, wow, it's amazing you did that. It would be more sort of, well, you need to make more sensible decisions with your £7 an hour job. And that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Why aren't you pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? Kind of blather talk from people who were born with elevator shoes. It's
It does nothing. In the meantime, I must say the stew looks about done, so we're good to go on that front.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at this stew. Give it a taste. Let us know how it tastes. And Michael, I hope you'll come back and do another one with us here soon, because I'm really enjoying being able to do this with the audience. I think this is going to be a very big part of Hand to Mouth moving forward, and the Hand to Mouth Club, because I think there are so many interesting and talented people that have kind of reached out and shown interest in helping make this something a little bit bigger. And I think that if we can share a few more viewpoints, it only helps. Up at the pot. I can't see. I can't quite see. Up more, tilt more, but don't spill. There we go. Beautiful. And that is boiled lettuce. You're not messing around. That's in chunks. So you're not even trying to hide it. You're not even trying to get away from it.
You can't quite see the juice, unfortunately. I'll put a picture in the Discord, I'm sure. It's a very rich smell, very full, very meaty. I'm also, of course, going to be carving that up with some 6pence granary cob, so that should be good as well. And flavour-wise, what are we looking? Oh wow. A bit of parting line. Lettuce goes really well with heart.
Lettuce goes really. So romaine lettuce and heart stew, and that's a big thumbs up.
Yeah, definitely. So the heart itself is quite gamey. Like I said, it's sort of like kidney almost, and especially as it's quite soft. And the lettuce there's a certain not quite sharpness, but it just kind of cuts through that quite gamey flavour, and it works really well. I think if I was going to cook that again, I'd probably put like some kind of acid in there as well to pump that up. So maybe when I'm slow cooking, add in some vinegar, just a drop or some kind of citrus.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done for me, apple cider vinegar is because I'm fancy now. Back in the day, white vinegar would have been fine. And in both cases, you would find that just a little bit of a drop brings up the flavors without actually turning it into a pickle soup. So you wouldn't know that there was that you had put vinegar in it necessarily. It just sort of brings the flavors out. I might also try maybe some lemon zest or something like that. Just a little bit of citrus note might be fun. But I just think about that with the romaine because I can't get out of salad with the romaine lettuce, and I know that doesn't taste like salad anymore because you boiled it. But
yeah, it does not. Weirdly distant from salad.
But I really, really appreciate it, Michael. I'm going to run now, and I'm going to do my flavoring oil for the rest of Test Kitchen. But thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to having you soon. And we're going to have this up on the Hand to Mouth Club as the video podcast this coming Friday. So look for that in the Discord. I will be letting everybody know, but I will not use the everyone tag too much in the Discord. I'm learning. I'm a 90-year-old man trying to understand modern technology. We'll do it over time. But certainly, I don't want to Amber Alert everyone on any level. Emergency! There's a comedy video. It involves food. That seems
Amber Alert. I'm not that young.
I've captured someone from the UK. They won't be released unless you come watch us live on the internet. How old are they? 30. Keep them.
Relatively young, okay? That's
All right, Michael. I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much again for joining me today. And until next time, mwah, love you, Hand to Mouth Club.